importance. Gender equality. The understanding that women and men have equal conditions for realizing their full human rights and for contributing to and benefiting from economic, social, cultural, and political development, and to enjoy education of high quality, achieve at equal levels, and enjoy equal benefits from education. Principles of inclusive education. Diversity, that is, people's differences which may relate to their race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, language, culture, religion, mental and physical ability, class and immigration status, enriches and strengthens all communities. All learners, different learning styles and achievements are equally valued, respected, and celebrated by society. Learners are enabled to fulfill their potential by taking into account individual requirements and needs. Support is guaranteed and fully resourced across the whole learning experience. All learners need friendship and support from people of their own age. All children and young people are educated together as equals in their local communities. Inclusive education is incompatible with segregated provision both within and outside mainstream education. Benefits of inclusion for disadvantaged and deprived students: meaningful friendships, increased appreciation and acceptance of individual differences, increased understanding and acceptance of diversity, respect for all people, prepares all students for adult life in an inclusive society, opportunities to master activities by practicing and teaching others, then greater academic outcomes. All students need are better met, greater resources for everyone. Then barriers to inclusive education. Attitude. This idiom used to say, old attitudes die hard. It is used to say to stop doing things that one has been doing for a long time. Example, one just can't seem to give up smoking. So old habit die hard. So, and many still resist the accommodation of students with disabilities and learning issues, as well as those from minority culture. Then physical barriers. In some districts, students are expected to attend schools that are inaccessible to them. In economically deprived school systems, especially those in rural areas, poorly cared for buildings can restrict accessibility. Some of these facilities are not safe or healthy for any students. Then curriculum. A rigid curriculum that does not allow for experimentation or the use of different teaching methods can be an enormous barrier to inclusion. Then teachers who are not trained or who are unwilling or unenthusiastic about working with differently abled students are a drawback to successful inclusion. Then language and communication. Many students are expected to learn while being taught in a language that is new and in some cases unfamiliar to them. This is obviously a significant barrier to successful learning. Too often, these students face discrimination and low expectations. Socio-economic factors. Areas that are traditionally poor and those with higher than average unemployment rates tend to have schools that reflect that environment, such as rundown facilities, students who are unable to afford basic necessities and other barriers to the learning process. Then funding. Adequate funding is a necessity for inclusion and yet it is rare. So schools often lack adequate facilities, qualified and properly trained teachers and other staff members, educational materials and general support. Organizational of the educational system. Centralized education systems are rarely conducive to positive change and initiative. Policies as barriers. Many policy makers don't understand or believe in inclusive education, and these leaders can stonewall effort to make school policies more inclusive. Then quality maintenance. According to the 2005 Global Monitoring Report, education should allow children to reach their fullest potential in terms of cognitive, emotional, and creative capacities. An inclusive approach to educational is one that strives to promote quality in the classroom. In order to move towards quality in education, changes are required at several levels. Placing the people at the center does not imply the students need to be taught and will learn subject matter and content separately. Within the framework of classroom, individual adaptation can be made. Furthermore, it involves people supporting one another according to their abilities and strengths. Quality in education is often perceived and measured as the academic results attained by the people through the successful completion of final exams and other quantitative measures. Human variations and differences are naturally occurring and a valuable part of society and should be reflected in schools. Schools should be able to offer opportunities for a range of working methods and individualized learning in order that no pupil is obliged to stand outside the fellowship of an participation in the school. Quality education is therefore education that is inclusive as it aims at the full participation of all learners. Then reforming school systems to becoming inclusive is not only about putting in place recently developed inclusive policies that meet the needs of all learners, but also about changing the culture of classrooms, schools, districts, and universities, etc. It is important to note that these changes process towards inclusion often begin on a small scale and involve overcoming some obstacles such as existing attitudes and values, lack of understanding, lack of necessary skills, limited resources, inappropriate organization. Then there are several important conceptual elements that contribute to successful change. They are clarity of purpose, um, realistic goals, motivation, support, resources, evaluation. There are several levels and dimensions to the educational change process. Some dimensions of change can effectively be measured. They are district benefits to children, wider impact on policies, practices, ideas, and beliefs, enhanced children's participation, reduced discrimination, example, gender, disability, caste, minority status. Then strengthened partnership and improved collaboration between ministries at the national and local level of government and at the community level. Development and strengthening of education system, technology and pedagogy to include all learners. Accessible and flexible curricula. UNESCO's work on quality and relevance of education is based on the premise that educational quality and access are intricately linked. The concept education for all thus questions a large part of the current school's way of organizing teaching. Teachers often retain the perspectives gained from their own school experiences. According to the 2005 Education for All report, one way to move towards a relevant, balanced set of aims is to analyze the curriculum in terms of inclusion. An inclusive approach seeks to discourage teaching which is based on a criterion of averages, meaning that some people will not be able to keep up while others will find it too easy and consider the teaching boring. So the curriculum must take into consideration the various needs of people to ensure access for all. Some of these strategies are providing a flexible time frame for people studying particular subjects, giving greater freedom to teachers in choosing their working methods, allowing teachers the opportunity of giving special support in practical subjects, allotting time for additional assistance for classroom-based work. Together with flexible curricula, flexible teaching learning methodology should be introduced. Making this a reality involves other changes in policy, including shifting away from long theoretical, pre-service based teacher training to greater continuous in service capacity building. Schools often need to be assisted in modifying subject matters and working methods, and this should be linked to appropriate skills training. It is known that 73 million children of primary school age were out of school in 2010, down from a higher of over 110 million out of school children in the mid of 1990s. According to new estimates by the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, about 80% of Indian population lives in rural areas without provision for special schools. It means there are an estimated 8 million children out of school in India, many of whom are marginalized by dimensions such as poverty, gender, disability, and caste. The needs and challenges for achieving the goal of inclusive education should be strengthened. And then next unit 7, domains of learning. So learning is an important of our everyday life. In our day-to-day life, we learn different contents by using different ways. Educational psychologist Benjamin Bloom developed classification of intellectual behavior and learning into 3 domains. They are cognitive domain, affective domain, and psychomotor domain. There are 6 process dimensions as per revised Bloom's taxonomy. These are remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. These 6 categories are further divided into 19 cognitive processes. Learning may be classified into different categories. The learning of verbal behavior. Verbal behavior means, according Skinner defined verbal behavior as behavior shaped and maintained by mediated consequences. He meant consequence controlled by another person. So the learning of verbal behavior is known as verbal learning. Psychologists use various methods to study the features of verbal learning. We learn many things through observing other people's behavior and attitudes, which is known as a social learning. According to social constructivism, learning did not simply comprise the assimilation and accommodation of new knowledge or skills, and it is the process by which learners were integrated into a knowledge community through social interactions. Mindful learning refers teaching skills and facts conditionally, which enables students to remain aware of a concept which emphasizes different situations may require different approaches. Then memory. Memory refers the mental ability to store our past experiences or learning and to reproduce that at a later stage when it requires. Psychologists classify memory into certain types. They are sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term memory, and also working memory. According to many psychologists, psychological research studies, memory can be improved. There are many powerful techniques to improve memory. Forgetting is a natural phenomenon and the opposite of learning. There are many reasons on why we forget things. Physical or psychological reasons may contribute for forgetting. Bloom's taxonomy. Benjamin Samuel Bloom was an American educational psychologist. He made important contributions to the classification of educational objectives and to the theory of learning. Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy is very important in the education process. Bloom's taxonomy was created in 1956 under the leadership of Benjamin Bloom. It is proposed to promote higher forms of thinking, such as analysis, evaluation, etc., rather than rote memorization or remembering facts. Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical model which is used to classify learning objectives into various levels based on complexity and specificity. It is useful to identify and measure learning. Bloom divided what and how we learn into three separate domains. They are cognitive domain. It is about knowledge. Then affective domain. It is about attitudes. Psychomotor domain. It's about skills. The cognitive domain consists of content knowledge of specific subject and the intellectual skills in it. There are 6 major categories in cognitive domain. It includes various cognitive outcomes which include simple behavior to complex behavior. The cognitive domain outcomes can be elaborated as recall. Recall, the ability to recall what has been learnt. Comprehension, the ability to show a basic understanding. Then application, the ability to apply learning to a new or novel task. Then analysis, it is the ability to break up information logically. Then synthesis is the ability to create something new. Then evaluation is the ability to evaluate the usefulness of something for a purpose. Then affective domain. Affective domain majorly consists of feelings, values, appreciation, enthusiasm, motivation, attitude, etc. The affective domain outcomes can be elaborated as students become aware of an attitude, behavior, or value in their day-to-day life. Students exhibit a reaction or change as a result of exposure to an attitude, behavior, or value in their day-to-day life. Students recognize value and display this through involvement or commitment in their day-to-day life. Students determine a new value or behavior as important as priority. Students integrate a consistent behavior as a naturalized value in spite of discomfort or cost. This value is recognized as a part of the person's character in one's life. Then psychomotor domain. The psychomotor domain defines physical skills or tasks. The psychomotor domain consists of use of gross and fine motor skills such as physical movement and coordination. Psychomotor domains outcome from students translate sensory input into physical tasks or activities. Students are able to replicate a fundamental skill or task. Students recognize standard or criteria important to person a skill or task. Students use standards to evaluate their own performances. Students apply the skills to real life situations, and students are able to instruct or train others to perform these skills. Then revised Bloom's taxonomy. A group of psychologists, curriculum theorists, instructional researchers, testing and assessment specialists established etc., published revised Bloom's taxonomy in 2001. Here, the six processed dimensions in revised Bloom's taxonomy are remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. Remember is usually called knowledge. It is related to the information about various subjects which can be recalled at a later stage. Then understand. Understanding is usually called comprehension. It is related to the things which we have heard, viewed, or read. Then apply. Applying is usually called application. It is related to applying an abstract idea in a concrete situation to solve a specific problem. Analyze. Analyzing is usually called analysis. It is related to breaking down a concept or idea into parts and showing relationship among the parts. Evaluation is related to making informal judgment about the value of ideas or materials and using standards and criteria to support opinions and views. Create. Creation is usually called synthesis. It is related to bringing together parts of knowledge of concept to form whole and building relationship for new situations. Here, Bloom's taxonomy of learning is given. The table: remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. Already we read in the beginning. So that these six domains are again divided into 19 processes. Here in the page number 93, they have given the chart very clearly. What is process dimensions and major process, sub-process they have given. So if you go through, you can understand them, all the 19 objects. Then framing objectives in accordance to process dimensions. While setting in instructional objectives, it is required to take process dimensions into consideration. The carefully planned process will help the students to understand and apply a concept suitable situation. Then we go for the Unit 18, types of learning. In the previous unit, we learned what is learning and memory. Now, types of learning. Learning plays an important role in our life. We learn various types of knowledge and skills across our lifespan. Learning helps us in the acquisition of language skills such as speaking. It helps to know and practice different customs and traditions of a culture. Learning influences our thinking, feelings, and actions. Psychologists define learning as a relatively permanent change in behavior and occurs as a result of experiences or practice. The term learning refers to the process of acquiring knowledge or skills. According to Kimble, learning refers to a relatively permanent change in response potentiality which occurs as a result of reinforced practice. There are different learning theories. Learning may be classified into different categories such as verbal learning, social learning, social constructive learning, and mindfulness learning. Verbal learning is of verbal behavior. It refers acquiring, retaining, and recalling a verbal content. The spoken language, the communication devices are part of this learning. Various instruments such as words, sound, symbols, pictures, figures are used in verbal learning. Verbal learning is a unique feature of human beings. Verbal learning is influenced by many factors, especially various features of material to be learned, such as meaningfulness of the content and length of the content. Psychologists identified some points. Learning time is proportional to length of material. The strength of learning increases with increased time of learning. Verbal learning may be intentional or unintentional. Methods of to study the futures of verbal learning. Psychologists use various methods to study the futures of verbal learning. Most of the methods use associative elements. The elements may be nonsense syllables, meaningful words, pictures, letters, numbers, etc. Here they have given paired associative learning. This method is used in learning a foreign language with the help of a list of paired associates. Example, CTY. Then CTY is non-syllables, then LAMP, that is lamp, meaningful word. Then KSX is the non-syllable. Then SILV, silver, is the meaningful word. So generally the first word is nonsense and the second is meaningful. A participant is the first presented the pair associative and is instructed to remember and recollect the meaningful words after the presentation of nonsense syllables. Once they have given this both nonsense and meaningful words, they have to read out and after reading them, they must remember and recollect them. First meaningful word after the presentation of nonsense syllables. The total number of trials will be taken to recollect all the meaningful words is the measure of the paired associative learning. This is, and then serial learning. This method is used to find out the process involved in verbal learning. A participant is presented a list of words and nonsense syllables and instructed to remember them serially. It is required to recall the second word of nonsense syllable when first one is presented. The process continues until the participant recollects all the words in the given list. Then free recall. This method is used to find out the organization process of memory. A participant is presented a list of words and it is required to recollect the words in any order. Experimental studies reveal that the words in the beginning and at the end of the list are remembered better than the words in the middle of the list. So it is identified that free recall is organized subjectively. Then social learning. We learn many things through observing other people's behavior and attitudes. Social learning theory was proposed by Albert Bandura, a prominent American psychologist. He compasses that we learn from one another through observation and imitation or modeling. According to Albert Bandura, when we observe others, then we form an idea of how particular behavior is performed and it serves as a model for the subsequent action or behavior of an individual. Social learning theory views behavior in terms of continuous reciprocal integration between cognitive, behavioral, and environmental factors. It gives more importance to attention, memory, and motivation in the process of learning. Here they have given the important steps in social learning. First one is attention. Attention is the first step in social learning. It refers to the process of an awareness of our environment, and the model behavior is attended by an individual in this step. It is the act or power of fixing one's mind upon something, carefully listening or watching, pay attention. Then retention. Retention is the second step in social learning. It refers to remembering certain things on which we pay attention. In this step, the individual remembers the model behavior as images in his memory. Then reproduction. Reproduction is the third step in social learning. It refers to reproducing the image from the memory. In this step, the model behavior which was attended and remembered is transformed into action after suitable analysis such as acceptability to the individual and the environment. Motivation, next one is motivation. Motivation is the final step in social learning. It refers to having a specific reason to imitate a behavior aspect. Motivation is derived from the word motive, which denote a person's needs, desires, wants, or urges. It is the process of motivating individuals to take action in order to achieve goals. For example, suppose a student happens to attracted towards a particular hairstyle. The student tries to keep the hairstyle in memory and get ready with that hairstyle. The new hairstyle may then reinforced by the responses he gets from family members, friends, teachers, etc. The positive reinforcement enforces make the student to continue the new hairstyle. As per Albert Bandura, an individual's personality refers an interaction between environment, behavior, and psychological processes. Social learning is an effective means of learning various behaviors in our day-to-day life. The way one speaks, dresses, and displays various emotions such as love, anger, or depend upon observed or model behavior. Social constructivism. Social constructivism was proposed by Lev Vygotsky, a prominent Russian psychologist. He emphasizes the collaborative nature of learning. According to him, it is not possible to separate learning from its social context or situation. He emphasizes that all cognitive functions of human beings originate in social context, that is, interactions, and learning did not simply comprise the assimilation and accommodation of new knowledge or skills, and it is the process by which learners were integrated into acknowledged community through social interaction. According to Lev, social constructivism theory, every function in the cultural development of a child appears twice: first between people and then inside the individual. According to cognitive psychologists, knowledge is being actively constructed by learners in response to interaction with environment. According to him, language and culture play an important role in intellectual development and perception process of an individual. So according to Vygotsky, learning is a collaborative process. The learner may reach it under the guidance of a teacher in collaboration with his or her peer group. Collaborative or group learning is a process of peer interaction which is mediated and structured by a teacher. According to behavioristic psychologists, motivation is extrinsic. It is a reaction to positive or negative reinforcements in the environment, whereas for cognitive psychologists, motivation is intrinsic in nature. In social constructivism, motivation is both extrinsic and intrinsic, which view learning as a social phenomenon where learners are motivated by rewards. Intrinsic is the value that things has in itself for its own sake, means doing something because it's personally rewarding to you. And extrinsic involves doing something because you want to earn a reward or avoid punishment. Next, zone of proximal development. The level of potential development is known as zone of proximal development. It indicates the level of development that the learner is capable of reaching. The learner may reach it under the guidance of a teacher or in collaboration with his or her peer group. Zone of proximal development is the difference between what a learner can do without help and what he or she can do with the help of others. According to behavioristic psychologists, motivation is extrinsic. Then transfer of learning. Transfer of learning is an important part of our everyday life. We all do transfer of learning in our day-to-day life. It refers to the effect of previous learning on new learning. And according to Bigger, in 1967, transfer of learning occurs when a person's learning in one situation influence his learning or performances in another situation. It refers to the capacity of an individual to apply acquired knowledge or skills to new context or situations. The similarities between previous and new learning situations or contexts play an important role in transfer of learning. Not only knowledge and skills are transferred from one context into, but also the habits, interests, and attitudes of an individual are transferred from one situation to the other and influence the performance. Example, if you learned Telugu to read and write and trying to learn Kannada, the previous learning affect the new learning. Types of transfer of learning: positive transfer of learning, negative transfer of learning, zero transfer of learning. This positive transfer of knowledge or skills considered to be positive if the previous learning facilities new learning. Example, learning of addition and multiplication, playing badminton and tennis. The negative transfer of learning, transfer of knowledge or skills considered to be negative if the previous learning retards new learning. Example, learning to pronounce the word put after the learning pronunciation of but. So next is zero transfer of learning. Transfer of knowledge or skills considered to be zero transfer if the previous learning neither facilitates nor retards new learning. Example, learning to play guitar and football. Then mindfulness learning. Mindfulness can be described as the practice of paying attention on purpose in the present moment and doing it intentionally. Then mindfulness is a process of engagement. It can be seen as a simple process of noticing new things. According to Ellen, traditional ways of learning, such as lecturing or experimental learning, can result in mindless behavior. In traditional learning, students are taught to overlearn many things, which in turn develops a belief that there is only one way to learn, and rote learning gets more importance. Then Langer suggests teaching knowledge, skills, and facts conditionally. It enables students to remain aware of the concept. It emphasizes the fact that different situations may require different approaches. Principle of mindfulness learning: being open to novelty, being alert to distinction, adopt sensitivity to different contexts, having an implicit awareness of multiple perspectives of a certain aspect, being orientated to the present moment. Thank you.